Turn on the camera right now. That chilling text from an unknown number hit me like a gut punch right in the middle of dinner with my daughter. Her laughter filled the room warm and familiar like it always did, but that message promised nothing but chaos. Just as she reached out to grab my hand and take my phone, the front door slammed open. You won't believe who walked in. Before we dive deeper, please hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. My hands shook as I held the check up for them to see. The signature looked almost exactly like mine, but the shaky pen strokes betrayed the forgery. Someone had clearly tried too hard to copy my final flourish. $5,000 made out to cash, dated just 3 days ago. I had never written that check. The kitchen door creaked behind me. Emily stepped inside her designer purse, casually slung over the one shoulder, keys jingling softly in her perfectly manicured fingers. She froze when she saw me sitting at the table holding the check. "Dad, what are you doing with Emily?" my daughter asked, confused. I raised the check higher, my voice firmer than I felt. "This is your doing, isn't it? That signature isn't mine?" Her face went pale. She stepped forward, reaching for the check. "Dad, it's not what you think. I pulled the check back sharply and stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. "You forged my signature. Listen to me." Her voice cracked like breaking glass. "I'm in trouble, okay? Real trouble. Bills are piling up and I couldn't ask you again after last time, so you decided to steal from me instead." Her composure shattered. She grabbed the edge of the kitchen counter so tightly her knuckles went wonky. "It's not stealing. You're my father. I knew you'd help if you understood." Understood. Understood that my own daughter is a criminal. The words hit her like a slap. Her eyes flashed with something dangerous. A criminal. Really, after everything I've been through since Mom died, you'd think I wanted this? My chest tightened painfully. Margaret's death had broken us both. But Emily had spiraled into a place I couldn't follow. The gambling, the shopping, the lies about where the money went. "Your mother always worried you loved money more than people," I said softly. Emily's voice turned cold. Don't you dare drag Mom into this!" She would have understood. She would have helped me by forging checks aligned to banks. She stared at me a long moment. Then she laughed, but it sounded shattered. "You really think this is about one check? You have no idea, do you?" Something in her tone made my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" She turned away, walking toward the living room. "Forget it. Just forget everything." I followed her, still clutching that damn check, my heart heavier than ever. "Emily, what did you mean?" "What don't I know?" I asked, my voice barely steady as she hurriedly stuffed things into her purse, her phone charger from the coffee table, a bottle of perfume from the mantel. She moved with a sharp, jerky efficiency like someone getting ready to run from everything and everyone. "Emily, please answer me." She stopped, spun around, eyes blazing with a fire I hadn't seen in years. "You want answers?" she snapped. "Fine. This isn't the first time, Dad. Not even close. And honestly, I'm not sorry." My world tilted sideways. My legs weakened beneath me. "What are you saying?" She took a breath, voice low, but cutting. "I'm saying you never understood me. Mom did. She understood. But you just judge. Always criticism. Never a single solution." She slammed her purse shut with a sharp, violent snap. "I'm done trying to explain myself to someone who only ever sees me as a disappointment." How many times I'd whispered my throat tight. Emily paused at the front door, hand resting on the doorknob. She glanced back at me, and in her eyes I saw something close to pity. "More than you want to know, Dad. Way more." Then the door slammed behind her. I watched through the window as she strode toward her car, heels clicking sharply against the driveway stones. The engine roared to life, and just like that, she was gone. I stood alone in the quiet of my living room, the check, the very thing that had started this nightmare, still clutched tightly in my hand. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked once, then fell silent, leaving only the heavy weight of the moment pressing down on me. Later on, the subway car rocking gently as it pulled into the financial district station. Emily's words echoed endlessly in my mind. More than you want to know. The check felt like a stone in my jacket pocket, folded and refolded so many times its creases had softened. I needed answers. I needed to understand how far this went. The bank building loomed tall, 40 stories of cold glass and steel, stretching up into the gray morning sky. Inside, the marble floors reflected the harsh glow of fluorescent lights, and the buzz of busy professionals surrounded me. I approached the front desk. "I need someone who can help me review my account history." "Mr. Harper, please." A woman in her 30s stepped forward with a warm but professional smile and extended her hand. "I'm Sarah Wilson, loan specialist. I understand you have some questions about your account." We sat down across from each other, a neat stack of paperwork and a computer screen between us. My fingers trembled as I pulled out the check from my pocket and laid it on the desk. "I found this in my kitchen yesterday," I said quietly. "I didn't write it." Sarah studied the check carefully, her professional smile faltering ever so slightly. "I see," she murmured, then turned back to her keyboard. Her fingers clicked quickly as she pulled up my full account profile. "Mr. Harper, you currently have an active loan for $500,000, she said, her voice steady but gentle. The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. $500,000. That was impossible. I never applied for such a loan, not ever. My mind raced. That can't be right. I never took out a loan like that. She turned the screen toward me. It was approved about 6 months ago. "Here, take a look at the signature on all these documents." I leaned in closer, squinting at the digital images displayed on the monitor. The signature looked exactly like mine, every curve, every stroke, but I had no memory of signing any of these papers, none of these dates, none of these amounts. "This is forgery," I said, my voice sounding strange and distant like it belonged to someone else. My heart clenched as I thought of my daughter. Oh God, what has she done? Sarah's expression softened, her eyes filled with sympathy. "Mr. Harper, I am so sorry. This is a very serious situation. If these signatures are indeed fraudulent, we need to investigate thoroughly. Please show me everything." For the next 20 minutes, she guided me through a devastating trail of financial ruin. The $500,000 loan was just the beginning. There were credit cards opened under my name, smaller loans, multiple cash advances, each one bearing my forged signature, all approved, because my credit score had been impeccable before this nightmare began. "The total exposure on your accounts is approximately $700,000, Sarah said softly, almost as if she were afraid to say the number aloud. My vision blurred. $700,000. My entire retirement fund, the equity in my home, everything Margaret and I had painstakingly built together over 40 years, all wiped out. When did this all start? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The first suspicious transaction was made 11 months ago, Sarah replied. A small credit card opened with a $5,000 limit. After that, the amounts escalated quickly. 11 months ago, right after Margaret's funeral, the time when Emily had been shattered, lost beyond words. When I had been trying my best to comfort her, she had been planning this betrayal behind my back. What are my options? Now?" I asked, desperation creeping into my tone. Sarah handed me a neat stack of paper copies. "You'll need to file police reports for identity theft immediately. The bank will open its own investigation as well. But, Mr. Harper..." She paused, choosing her words with great care. This level of systematic fraud, especially when it's perpetrated by a family member, is going to make this process very complicated. I rose slowly to my feet, legs unsteady, as if they might give way beneath me. Clutching the stack of documents tightly against my chest, the cold blast from the bank's air conditioning bit sharply through my thin jacket, sending a shiver down my spine. "Thank you," I managed to say, voice raw and hoarse. Sarah's eyes held a trace of sympathy as she continued, "Mr. Harper, I have to inform you that some of these loans are already in default. You will be receiving legal notices very soon." The elevator ride down seemed to stretch on endlessly, every second weighed heavy, as if time itself was conspiring against me. When the doors finally slid open and I stepped out onto the sidewalk, the summer heat hit me like a brick wall, the warmth searing and oppressive. Around me, people flowed past, talking on their phones, carrying steaming cups of coffee, immersed in their ordinary lives, completely unaware that mine was falling apart. I glanced down at the papers in my hands, each sheet a brutal reminder of my daughter's betrayal, printed cold and stark in black and white. Later back at home, my keys hit the kitchen counter with a harsh clatter that echoed too loudly in the suddenly unfamiliar space. The house felt different now, like stepping into a crime scene instead of a home. I spread the bank documents out across the very table where I had found that first damning check barely 24 hours ago. $700,000. I began sorting the pages carefully, lining them up in chronological order to map the timeline of Emily's deception. November 2024, first credit card open. December, a personal loan for $20,000. January, another credit card. Then February, the big one, the $500,000 mortgage taken out against my house. My house, the one Margaret and I had bought as newlyweds. The home where we had raised Emily, the room upstairs where Margaret had breathed her last. I moved into the living room, needing to see a familiar face, something to hold on to. Margaret's photograph sat on the mantel, smiling back at me from our 30th anniversary. She wore that blue dress, the very same one Emily had borrowed once, and never returned. "What would you tell me to do?" I whispered into the empty room. Margaret had always seen through Emily's charm. "She loves money more than people," she'd said once after Emily had borrowed $200 and disappeared for a week. At the time, I defended our daughter, calling Margaret too harsh, too suspicious. Now, with the weight of everything laid bare, I finally understood. Margaret had been protecting me all along. Back in the kitchen, I pulled out a legal pad and began writing, trying to make sense of my limited and painfully grim options. I could call the police, file charges for identity theft and fraud. Emily would likely go to prison. Or I could try to handle this privately. Demand she start making payments. Try somehow to salvage whatever fragile thread was left of our relationship. But the numbers told a harsher truth. Even if Emily wanted to repay this colossal debt, which after yesterday seemed doubtful, she simply didn't have the means. No one accumulates $700,000 in debt by accident. This was calculated, systematic theft. I picked up my phone, scrolling to Emily's contact. My finger hovered over the call button, heart pounding as uncertainty and sorrow battled inside me. What did I hope would happen? That Emily would break down in tears, fall to her knees, and beg for forgiveness, that she'd promised to fix everything to make it right, that we'd hold each other and cry together, like we did at Margaret's funeral, the day when grief had briefly brought us close. But the woman who slammed the door behind her yesterday was not that girl, not the daughter I once knew. The woman who had forged my signature over and over again, the woman who mortgaged my home without so much as a word, the woman who had looked me straight in the eye and accused me of being judgmental. That woman was a stranger, yet no matter how much I wanted to turn away, she was still my daughter. I set the phone down on the table and moved slowly toward the window, my thoughts swirling like a storm. Outside, the old swing set in the backyard stood silent and rusted, yet stubbornly intact. I'd built it with my own hands when Emily turned 7, 3 weekends of sweaty afternoons, tightening every bolt to make sure it was safe. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent her entire life trying to keep her safe, only to realize she'd become the one I needed protection from. My phone buzzed, breaking through the heavy silence. A message from Mike, my old partner from the NYPD. "Haven't heard from you in weeks. Coffee this afternoon, Mike Reynolds." Mike had been on the force for 25 years before retiring, but he still had the sharp instincts of a detective. He'd seen every kind of family tragedy, every kind of betrayal imaginable. Maybe he'd know what to do when your own child is the one who shatters your life. I picked up the phone again, a thumb hovering over Mike's name, but then almost without thinking, my gaze drifted to Emily's contact instead. She needed to know. She needed to understand that I had uncovered everything, that this wasn't something I could just forget or let slide. Whether I called the police or tried to salvage what was left between us, she had to grasp the full weight of her actions. My finger trembled as it moved over her name. One call could open a door that might never close again, changing everything between us forever. But silence wouldn't erase the debt. It wouldn't undo the forged signatures. It wouldn't make any of this go away. I pressed the number and listened to it ring, my heart pounding in my chest. 24 hours later, I sat alone, staring at Emily's contact on my phone screen, waiting for the next move, knowing that everything had changed and nothing would ever be the same. The bank documents lay sprawled across my kitchen table like pieces of evidence at a crime scene. Each sheet felt heavier than the last, a silent testimony to a betrayal I could hardly bear to face. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say 12 times, but now with my finger hovering and trembling over the call button, every word suddenly seemed impossible. The phone rang 4 times before she finally picked up. "What do you want, Dad?" Her voice was sharp and cold, just like during our last bitter conversation. "Emily," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know about the $500,000 loan. You need to explain this to me." Silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear a television humming softly in the background, a sitcom, complete with canned laughter, that felt grotesquely out of place given what we were going through. "What loan?" she asked after a pause, but something in her tone had shifted. The confidence was faltering, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. "The $500,000 you borrowed against my house," I said, the words catching in my throat. "The bank showed me everything." "Dad, you're exaggerating," she replied, defensive. "It's just temporary financial difficulties. It'll pass." Temporary. I gripped the phone tighter, my voice rising despite my best efforts. Emily, I have 12 forged documents right here, 12 credit cards, personal loans, cash advances adding up to $700 and $1,000. On her end, the laughter from the TV abruptly stopped. I imagined her sitting there, hands trembling as she reached for the remote, the same way I had reached for that first check I found. You actually went to the bank. Her voice softened, fragile now, like the little girl who once asked me for bedtime stories. I had to know how deep this went. And now I do. I picked up one of the documents and read aloud the dates and amounts, cutting through the tension. November 15th, 2024. Personal loan for $20,000. December 3rd. Another credit card. January. And I stopped, my voice sharp. Stop! Okay, she said quickly. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did, Emily. You mortgaged my house. I swallowed hard, the pain slicing through me. The house your mother and I bought together, the home where she died, where I planned to spend my final years. Her voice turned vicious bitterness, flooding in again. You only ever think about money. I clenched my free hand into a fist. What about what I've been going through? What about my problems? Her voice cracked. My problems. You created these problems by stealing from your own father. I didn't steal, she whispered as if defending herself from a verdict she already knew was harsh. I needed help. And you've always been so stingy with everything. The mention of Margaret hit me like a blow to the chest, knocking the air out of me. Don't you dare bring Mom into this, I said through gritted teeth. She would be ashamed of what you've become. Ashamed, Emily's voice cracked with defiance. She understood me. She knew what it was like to need things, to want more, a better life. You never understood it, either of us. I rose from my chair and began pacing by the window, desperate to find some anchor in the storm. Outside, Mrs. Chen from next door was calmly watering her garden, her world peaceful and untouched, while mine was unraveling in every direction. Your mother warned me about your relationship with money, I said quietly, my voice heavy with memory. She said you loved it more than people. There was a pause. Then Emily's voice broke, fragile but sharp. You defended me then. She did, I continued softly, but she also said it would destroy someone one day. I thought she meant you, Emily whispered. I never imagined it would be me. Dad, listen. Her tone softened for a moment, pleading. No. You listen. My voice came out harder than I intended, filled with frustration and heartbreak. I trusted you. After your mother died, I tried to be there for you. I gave you money when you asked. Never questioned where it went. And this is how you repay me. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, she said, her voice rising with desperation. The bills, the payments you created, this pressure. I clenched my fists, my chest tightening. I had a simple retirement planned enough to live comfortably, maybe even take that trip Margaret and I always talked about, but now I might lose everything because my own daughter is a criminal. I'm not a criminal, Emily spat back. You forged my signature dozens of times, took out loans in my name, stole $700,000. What do you call that? There was silence broken only by her heavy, angry breaths that reminded me of the tantrum she threw as a child. Finally, she said, I call it survival. And if you can't understand that, she added bitterly, maybe Mom was right about more than just money. What's that supposed to mean? I asked, voice cracking. Figure it out yourself. And then the line went dead. I stood there holding the silent phone, staring at the black screen that reflected my tired, worn face. Somewhere in the distance, children's laughter drifted through the evening air, bright and innocent, cruel against the weight of my reality. $700,000, my daughter, my only family left. I set the phone down beside the scattered documents and sat back, trying to piece together what came next. The next morning, I climbed the familiar stairs to Mike's apartment, clutching a manila folder stuffed with bank documents. My legs felt like lead, as if I were wading through deep, endless water. Sleep had eluded me since Emily had hung up. Mike answered the door on the second knock, his weathered face immediately creasing with concern. John, you look terrible. His voice was rough but steady, like a rock in a storm. I need to talk to someone who understands criminals. He stepped aside, motioning me into his small, familiar kitchen. The rich aroma of coffee percolating on the counter filled the room, a small comfort in the chaos swirling inside me. Mike had always been a steady presence in my life. 25 years on the NYPD, retired now, but still sharp as a razor. What's going on? He asked, pulling out a chair for me at his scarred wooden table. I sat down and opened the manila folder I'd brought. Papers spilled out like cold accusations. Mike, I don't know what to do. I confessed, my voice heavy with pain. She's my daughter. Without missing a beat, Mike poured 2 cups of black coffee and sat down opposite me. His gray eyes, the same ones that had interrogated countless suspects, locked onto the scattered documents before us. Start from the beginning, he said quietly. So I told him everything: the forged check I had found in my kitchen, the trip to the bank, the horrifying discovery of systematic fraud that threatened to ruin me. Mike listened intently, never interrupting, though he occasionally picked up a paper to study it more closely. $500,000. The amount echoed in the room as he finally spoke, setting down one of the loan documents. John, this is serious crime. This isn't some petty shoplifting or a bounced check. I can't put my own child in prison. I whispered, the weight of my conflict crashing down on me. Mike leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady and patient, and the kind that came from decades of witnessing every kind of family tragedy imaginable. And she can destroy you financially, he added. Have you thought about that? I nodded, the memories haunting me. I had spent last night lying awake, staring at the ceiling in the bedroom where Margaret and I once planned our future together. Give me a little more time, I pleaded quietly. Maybe she'll come to her senses. Time for what Mike's voice was sharp, now tinged with frustration. To forge more signatures, to dig you deeper into this mess. He rose and walked over to the kitchen window that overlooked the same Brooklyn street where we had both lived for decades. John, he said, turning back to face me. In my experience, people who commit this level of fraud don't suddenly develop a conscience. She's not some random street criminal. She's your daughter, and she stole $700,000 from you. His voice was hard but honest. Mike began sorting the papers into neat piles, his police instincts kicking in. Document by document, he was building a case, probably without even realizing it. What would you do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. If it were your kid. Mike sat back down, his hardened expression softening just a little, like a weathered oak showing the first signs of spring. I'd want to believe they could change too, he said slowly, but I'd also have to protect myself. How I pressed, feeling the weight of the impossible decisions crushing me. File a police report, Mike said plainly. Get this documented officially. Even if you don't press charges right away, you need legal protection. Paper trails matter. The thought of walking into a police station, looking strangers in the eye, and telling them my daughter was a thief made my stomach twist in knots. I can't. Not yet. Mike nodded slowly as if he understood more than he was saying. But I caught something flicker in his eyes, a quick calculation, that steely cop instinct kicking in, the kind of look he used to get when mapping out a tough case. Okay, he said finally. But John, promise me, don't let her talk you into anything stupid. Don't sign anything. Don't give her access to any more accounts. I won't. I promised, voice firm, but fragile. I looked down at the papers spread before me, worn and weighty, and I'll keep these safe. Mike nodded, satisfied. These are your only proof. I gathered everything back into the folder, suddenly feeling the exhaustion of carrying this burden settled deep in my bones. Mike walked me to the door, his hand heavy and steady on my shoulder. You're a good father, he said quietly. But sometimes good fathers have to make hard choices. I walked home slowly, the folder clutched under my arm like a shield against the world. Behind me, I didn't see Mike return to his kitchen. Didn't see him pick up his phone. Didn't see the determined set of his jaw or the fire ignite behind his tired eyes. Some choices I was about to learn don't just get made, they get made for you. 3 days passed in a heavy silence. I waited by the phone, every ring sending a jolt through my chest, praying that Emily would call. With an explanation, an apology, some flicker of the daughter I once knew buried somewhere beneath the stranger who had so coldly hung up on me. Then on Thursday evening, as I picked listlessly at a microwave dinner, the phone rang. Emily's name lit up the screen. Hi, Dad. Her voice was completely different, soft, hesitant, almost shy. I nearly dropped the phone. I wasn't expecting to hear from you, I managed. I know, she said, voice trembling slightly. And I'm sorry about that. I was angry and scared, and I said things I didn't mean. She paused, and I could hear the shaky intake of breath on the other end. I've been doing a lot of soul-searching these past few days. My heart began to pound with something dangerously close to hope. I realize now how much I hurt you, really hurt you, and I want to make things right. Her voice carried the same tentative tone she'd used as a child when she'd broken something and wanted to fix it before I even noticed. I want that too, sweetheart. Can you come for dinner tomorrow night? I'll cook your favorite. That pot roast with the carrots you always loved when Mom made it. Tears pricked at my eyes. Margaret's pot roast? Emily hadn't cooked it since the funeral. Of course. I knew you'd understand eventually. I do understand. And Dad, she added, her voice catching just a bit, bring all those papers from the bank. We'll go through everything together and figure out how to fix this mess. The relief flooding through me was so intense I had to sit down. Really? You mean that I mean it? 700 Zuwas tomorrow. Okay, and Dad. Yes, I love you. I know I don't say it enough, but I do love you. Those words lingered in my mind long after the call ended. After Emily hung up, I stayed in my kitchen grinning like a fool. The voice on the phone, the Emily who had reached out, was the daughter I remembered. Thoughtful, remorseful, willing to take responsibility. The harsh, angry woman from our last conversation must have been fear, talking a panic born from being caught. People can change, especially when they realize how much they stand to lose. I spent the entire next day pacing, planning what I would say, how we could work together to clean up the financial wreckage. That maybe she could get a loan from her company, or perhaps we could set up a payment plan with the banks. The most important thing was that we face it together as a family. By 6:30 in the evening, I had loaded the manila folder into my car and was driving toward Manhattan. The streets were quieter than usual, the traffic light and easy. I found a parking spot right outside Emily's building, an unexpected stroke of luck. Everything seemed to be falling into place. As the elevator ascended to her floor, I caught myself humming softly, a simple habit I hadn't indulged in since Margaret passed away. The familiar scent of pot roast greeted me the moment Emily opened the door. For a fleeting moment, it felt like stepping back in time to better days. Dad, she said, wrapping me in a tight hug. I noticed she'd styled her hair the way Margaret used to like it, soft waves framing her face. I'm so glad you came. The dining table was set beautifully, her good china gleaming under the soft glow of flickering candles nestled between crystal wine glasses. She was wearing the dress I had bought her last Christmas, the one that had seemed too formal at the time. Tonight, it fit the mood perfectly. This looks wonderful. I said, my voice thick with emotion. I wanted it to be special. A new beginning for us, she replied, a hopeful smile tugging at her lips. She gently took the folder from my hands and placed it carefully on the side table. We'll go through all this after dinner. Okay, I want to understand everything. I squeezed her hand, overwhelmed with gratitude that my daughter, the real Emily, was here reaching out. What I didn't know was that beneath that hopeful veneer, she was quietly setting a perfect trap. I woke before dawn in the next morning. My thoughts immediately raced to tonight's dinner, to the fragile hope that had begun to stir in my chest. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to believe that Emily wanted to fix things, that my daughter was coming back to me. The morning routine felt different, more purposeful, more alive. I carefully selected my best navy suit, the one Margaret always said to make my eyes look younger, like they could still hold some light despite everything. I pressed it meticulously, making sure every crease was perfect. Tonight mattered. Every detail mattered. After breakfast, I found myself pulling out our family photo album, something I hadn't done since Margaret's funeral. I flipped it through page after page of Emily's childhood, frozen in time, her tiny hands holding crayons, her shy smile on the first day of school, those missing front teeth framed in Christmas snapshots, and then her radiant grin on graduation day. Where had that sweet, bright girl gone? There she was, at 7, a delicate flower tucked behind her ear after helping Margaret bake cookies, and at 15 rolling her eyes at my camera, but laughing despite herself, so full of life and innocence. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. Somewhere between her college years and now the daughter I loved had slipped away, replaced by someone so desperate she stole from her own father. Tonight, I get her back. I whispered to Margaret's photograph on the mantel, the weight of hope and heartbreak settling in my chest. By noon, I had methodically organized all the bank documents into chronological order. Each paper told a chapter of Emily's desperation, but tonight they'd also tell a different story. A story of reconciliation, of two broken people trying to rebuild trust piece by piece. We'd work through this together, create a payment plan, start fresh with honesty. The flower shop on 7th Avenue had a bouquet of pristine white roses, Emily's favorite since she was a child. Margaret had bought them every year for her birthday, a simple tradition filled with love. Special occasion, the elderly woman behind the counter asked, her eyes twinkling. I'm reconciling with my daughter, I replied, feeling a small flicker of warmth. Her face lit up like she understood something deep and precious. These will be perfect. I chose a dozen, asking her to wrap them in pale yellow paper. Emily always said yellow was the color of the new beginnings. The afternoon passed slowly. I cleaned the house again, even though it was already spotless, because some rituals soothe the restless soul. I checked my reflection in the mirror a dozen times, adjusting my tie, smoothing back my hair, rehearsing what I'd say. Emily, we can work through anything together. I love you more than you'll ever know. At 5:00, I called a cab. The documents were carefully tucked into my old leather briefcase, the bouquet cradled gently in my arms, and in my jacket pocket, Margaret's engagement ring, something I had been saving for Emily's wedding day. Maybe tonight I'd give it to her anyway. A symbol, a fragile promise. Trust restored. The subway ride to Manhattan felt eternal, each stop echoing the beating of my anxious heart. Other passengers hurried past me on the subway platform, each wrapped up in their own worlds, their own worries and distractions, while I clutched the leather briefcase tightly, the weight of it grounding me. Inside lay the undeniable evidence of my daughter's betrayal, but also the fragile thread of hope for our forgiveness and a way forward. Emily's building rose ahead, its sleek glass and steel reaching into the darkening evening sky like a silent sentinel. I glanced at my watch, 6:55 p.m. Perfect timing. As I stepped into the elevator, my reflection stared back at me, hopeful and nervous, a little worn, but still holding on to the stubborn belief that love could conquer even this. The sweet scent of the white roses filled the confined space, their delicate fragrance whispering promises of new beginnings. Tonight had to be different. It had to be. The elevator doors slid open, and there she was, Emily standing in her doorway, radiant and stunning in the blue dress I had given her last Christmas. It hugged her in all the right places, and she'd styled her hair just like Margaret used to love. My breath caught. She rushed forward and pulled me into a hug that felt warm and real. "Dad, you look wonderful," she said softly. She took the bouquet, burying her face in the petals. White roses, you remembered. Her apartment smelled exactly like pot roast, just as she promised. The dining table was beautifully set, her best china gleaming in the soft candlelight stuck with crystal glasses catching the flicker. For a moment I was transported back to the dinners we used to share, when Margaret was still alive, when laughter filled the room, and not silence and tension. "This is beautiful!" I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I wanted tonight to be special," she replied, her eyes shimmering. "A new beginning for us." She guided me to the couch and carefully took the briefcase from my hand, setting it on the side table like it was both precious and dangerous. "Wine I got. That Merlot you like." We sat across from each other at the elegant table, the flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows on her face. But beneath the warmth, something felt off, like the air was charged with unspoken tension. Emily kept glancing at the briefcase, her fingers tapping nervously against her wine glass. My eyes drifted to the coffee table, where a mess of papers peeked out from beneath scattered magazines, credit card statements, overdue bills, and notices of unpaid debts, the hidden fallout of financial chaos she hadn't yet shared. The pot roast. "It's just like Mom's," I said, trying to recapture the warmth from our recent phone conversation. "I found her recipe card." Emily's smile flickered but didn't reach her eyes. "Dad, about those documents you brought," she began, but then stopped herself. "We'll get to that." I cut another piece of meat and savored the familiar flavors, willing the comfort of the meal to bridge the growing gap between us. "I'm just glad we're talking again," I said softly. "Me too," she replied. But beneath her words, her leg bounced restlessly beneath the table, betraying the nervous energy she tried so hard to conceal. I hesitated, then asked, "How much did you say the total was?" 700,000, she whispered. I watched her face, carefully searching for any flicker of the daughter I once knew, but all I saw was determination sharpened by desperation. Still, I forced myself to speak calmly. "Emily, the important thing is that we're going to solve this together." She nodded quickly, too quickly. "Absolutely," she said, her voice smooth, but a little too rehearsed. "That's exactly what I want to discuss." Her fingers drummed lightly against her wine glass, the rhythmic tapping a subtle beat of impatience. I've been thinking about the logistics. Relief washed over me. Finally, she was taking this seriously. "I'm so glad you're thinking this through." "Oh, I am," she said, leaning forward. Her expression shifted, a calculated gleam in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Here's what I need from you, Dad. To pay back that money, I'm going to need capital to get started. Seed money for the repayment plan." My fork paused midair, the last bite of pot roast turning suddenly bitter on my tongue. "Seed money," I repeated, incredulous. "Just a small loan, maybe 100,000 to begin with." I have some investment opportunities that could generate the income to pay you back quickly. The warmth of the meal drained away, leaving a cold lump of disbelief in my throat. Emily, you owe me $700,000. I didn't come here to loan you more money. Her eyes narrowed slightly and her voice took on the patronizing tone she used as a teenager when pleading for a later curfew. But Dad, think about it logically. I can't make money to pay you back if I don't have money to invest. I set down my fork, the weight of her words settling heavily between us. Are you seriously asking me for more money? She leaned in, her voice lowering but edged with sharpness. I'm proposing a business solution. Her mask of sweetness was slipping, revealing something harder beneath. You want your money back, right? This is how we make that happen. I shook my head, my voice rising in disbelief and anger. Emily, this is absurd. You stole from me. You forged my signature dozens of times. You mortgaged my house. And now I paused, swallowing hard. You want me to give you more. It's not giving. She snapped back, her voice sharper now. It's investing. I pushed back from the table, the chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. The sound echoed my frustration. I'm being short-sighted. You committed multiple felonies. Her eyes flashed with a mixture of defiance and desperation. Everything I did was for survival. Emily rose to her feet as well, but this time her facade finally shattered. The walls she'd built around herself crumbled, revealing a raw, vulnerable fury beneath. You have no idea what kind of pressure I'm under, she said, voice trembling but fierce. What it's like to live in the city to just keep a decent life going. So you decided to destroy mine instead. Her gaze swept wildly across her sleek, expensive apartment as if the very walls held her desperate secrets. I decided to use resources that were ultimately going to be mine anyway, she said, voice growing colder. When you die, I inherit everything. I just needed access to some of it now. The words hit me like a series of physical blows, each syllable heavier than the last. This wasn't my daughter speaking, it was a stranger wearing Emily's face, eyes glinting with cold calculation, treating my death like a mere business transaction. Suddenly her tone snapped. Get out! When I blinked, startled. Get out of my apartment. Take your moral outrage and your self-righteousness and leave. Emily strode over to the side table where my briefcase rested, the one stuffed with all the damning documents, the evidence of her betrayal. And take these with you. I reached out for the briefcase, but she was faster. Our hands collided on the worn leather handle, fingers locking in a silent battle. Give me that, I said, voice low but firm. No, she replied, her grip tightening like a vice. I think I'll keep these. We stood there holding onto the briefcase, faces inches apart, the tension crackling like electricity between us. In her eyes, I no longer saw the little girl who used to beg me for bedtime stories. There was only cold, relentless calculation, and barely contained a rage. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking the moment. I pulled it out, heart pounding. The screen glowed with a message I hadn't expected to see, and unknown number words flashing like a warning. Behind me, the police officers moved through Emily's apartment with measured, methodical precision. Cameras flashed, capturing every scattered document, every piece of evidence of the life unraveling before them. I stood by the window and numb watching them work, still clutching my phone with that mysterious message glowing bright. Detective Morrison approached his notebook, open eyes, sharp but professional. Mr. Harper will need a formal statement about the crimes committed against you. I nodded slowly, barely able to process how rapidly everything had changed. Just an hour ago, I'd been hoping for reconciliation with my daughter. Now she was in handcuffs, and strangers were photographing proof of her betrayal. These documents will become evidence in the prosecution, Morrison said carefully, bagging the papers, his voice steady but sympathetic. The originals with each forged signatures are particularly important. Will I be testifying at court? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Most likely yes, he replied. Your testimony will be absolutely crucial. Detective Morrison said, his tone firm but kind. We need to establish the full timeline, the scope of the fraud, the entire pattern. It's the only way to build a strong case. He paused, studying my face as if weighing how much more I could bear. Are you all right, sir? This has been a traumatic evening. Traumatic felt like the faintest word to describe the storm tearing through my life. I swallowed hard. Detective, how did you know to come here tonight? How did you know about the dinner? The timing Morrison exchanged a quick glance with his partner, then offered a small, knowing smile. You have some very caring friends, Mr. Harper. The weight of his words crashed over me like a wave. Someone tipped you off, someone who knew what was happening. And when yes, he confirmed. Someone called in a tip about ongoing financial fraud and suggested that tonight would be the perfect time to make the arrest. My hands trembled involuntarily, a cold realization sinking deep. A friend, someone with law enforcement experience, had been quietly watching, gathering information, waiting for the right moment. They'd been conducting their own investigation and felt it was time for official intervention, Morrison added, handing me his business card. I clutched it like a lifeline. It had to be Mike. 20 minutes later, I sat in the back of a taxi, the familiar silhouette of Emily's apartment building shrinking behind us as the city lights blurred by. The driver tried to make polite conversation about the weather, but my mind was far away, consumed by the revelation settling like a stone in my chest. My oldest friend, the man who stood by me through decades, had orchestrated my daughter's arrest. Back home, I sank into my living room chair, surrounded by the family photos I'd leafed through that very morning when a hope had still bloomed. Margaret's serene smile glowed softly from the mantel, and I wondered what she would think of everything that had unfolded tonight. Would she be proud that justice had been served? Would she be heartbroken that our daughter was now behind bars? Would she be grateful that Mike had protected me? When I myself had failed, I reached for my phone, scrolling slowly to Mike's contact. My finger hovered over the call button just as it had months ago when I had first decided to confront Emily about the forged check. That moment now felt like a lifetime away. The mysterious SMS still lingered on my screen. Turn on camera. There's going to be a show now. It all clicked into place. Mike hadn't just helped. He'd planned every step. He'd wanted video evidence of Emily's confessions, her demands for more money, her chilling lack of remorse. He'd orchestrated the entire operation. I pressed Mike's number and listened to the steady ring. When he answered, there was no hesitation in his voice. "Mike, you organized the arrest, didn't you?" "Yes." "I did," he replied quietly. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the day's events settle deep into my bones. That morning, after another sleepless night staring at the ceiling, I had called him. And now, finally, justice was moving forward. Mike's direct admission landed on me like a physical blow, hard and undeniable, even though deep down I'd known it all along. His voice, calm and unwavering, cut through the haze of my denial. "John, you never could have done this yourself," he said matter-of-factly. "You love her too much to see clearly." I swallowed hard the weight of his words, pressing down like a stone. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Since the day you left my apartment," Mike replied. "I saw it right away. You'd never press charges, never protect yourself. So I decided to protect you instead." His calm authority, the same steady tone he'd carried through 25 years with the NYPD, made the reality even harder to deny. "I followed her for 3 days," Mike continued. "You followed Emily. She was meeting other potential victims, John, mostly elderly men just like you. While she was manipulating you for more money, she was already working on her next targets." I felt the cold mug of coffee on the kitchen table, long forgotten and growing cold, as Mike detailed every painstaking step. I documented everything he said. The meetings, the locations, the pattern of her behavior, every interaction and every lie. The sound of papers rustling came through his phone, a steady reminder that Mike was piecing together the puzzle like the skilled detective he still was. On Tuesday, I contacted Detective Morrison. "Good man, an old colleague of mine," Mike explained. "I showed him the documents you gave me, plus my surveillance photos. They'd been looking for someone matching Emily's profile for weeks." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, the pieces finally coming together. "That SMS you got last night, that was me. I needed video evidence proof that she was demanding more money and had no intention of paying anything back." Mike paused for a moment, his voice lowering. "I was watching from across the street when I saw her grab your briefcase, saw the argument escalating. I sent the text, then called Morrison immediately." I stood and walked to the window, staring out at the quiet Brooklyn street where Mike and I had lived as neighbors for over 20 years. "You could have told me," I said quietly. "No," he answered firmly. "I couldn't. You would have tried to stop me, warned her, found some way to sabotage your own protection." His tone softened slightly, filled with the weight of years and hard decisions. "Friends protect each other, John, even when it hurts." There was a long silence between us. "She's going to prison," Mike said finally. "She belongs there. If I hadn't acted when I did, you'd be bankrupt within a year. She was bleeding you dry and moving on to the next victims." The reality crashed down on me heavier than I had ever imagined. How many elderly people have to suffer because you can't face the truth about your daughter? Mike's words cut deep, sharp, and unyielding. They stung because they were painfully true. I could see it all now, how I had clung to hope, blind to the reality, holding onto the fantasy that Emily could change, right up until the moment she nearly destroyed me completely. I sank back into the kitchen chair, feeling the weight of it all pressing down. The exhaustion wasn't just physical, it was bone deep. So, what happens now? My voice cracked uncertain, Mike's tone soft and steadying me like he always did. Now you testify. When the time comes, you tell the truth, everything she did to you. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The prosecution has a solid case. They'll probably offer her a plea deal to avoid a lengthy trial, but your testimony will be crucial. I nodded slowly, running a hand over my face. I don't know how to feel about any of this. You should feel grateful, Mike said gently. Grateful that someone cared enough to do what you couldn't do yourself. I looked up, meeting his voice through the phone. It was the first light in the darkness. Feel relieved that your financial future is secure again. Feel proud that you're finally holding her accountable. A pause, and the question I hadn't expected. Will you come to the hearing with me? Of course, I answered immediately. We'll face this together, just like we always have over all these years. After we hung up, I sat alone at the kitchen table with the silence thick around me as I processed everything Mike had told me. He'd risked our friendship to save me from my own blindness. He'd used every skill, every contact he had to protect me when I was too emotionally compromised to protect myself. Margaret always said Mike was the best friend a person could ever have. Now more than ever, I understood why. 3 weeks later, Mike pulled up in his old Honda, the engine humming softly as we drove toward the federal courthouse in Manhattan. The towering limestone columns of the building loomed above as a solemn monument to justice and consequences. The morning air was heavy with heat and anticipation. We climbed the courthouse steps side by side. My best Navy suit felt strange, formal, a stark contrast to the ragged nights and casual days I'd endured recently. Ready for this? Mike asked, adjusting his tie with practiced ease. As ready as I'll ever be, I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I had expected. Dark wood paneling lined the walls, lending a serious, almost oppressive atmosphere. Emily sat at the defendant's table wearing an orange jumpsuit that swallowed her slight frame. Her hair was pulled back tight, the polished woman who had served me dinner just weeks ago and now gone. She didn't look up when I entered. Judge Patricia Thornton presided with quiet authority. Her silver-gray hair was pulled into a neat bun-wire-rimmed glasses perched low on her nose, her eyes sharp and unsparing, the kind of eyes that had witnessed every form of human failure and deceit and remained unshaken. Mr. Harper, the judge said as my name was called, "Would you like to provide a victim impact statement?" I rose slowly, legs unsteady beneath me, clutching the folded paper with the speech I'd written. My voice trembled at first. Your Honor, my daughter stole $700,000 from me over the course of 11 months. She forged my signature, repeatedly opened credit accounts in my name, and even mortgaged my house without my knowledge. With every word, my voice grew stronger, filled with the pain and betrayal I had carried for so long. But the financial damage, that staggering $700,000 loss, it wasn't even the worst part. What cut deeper was the betrayal of something far more precious: trust. She had systematically destroyed that trust and weaponized my love for her, and never once showed genuine remorse until the walls closed in. Even then, when confronted with the truth, instead of begging for forgiveness or promising to make amends, she demanded more money from me, the very person she had shattered. Emily's shoulders trembled slightly as she sat there, the weight of the courtroom's silence pressing down. Yet despite the small quiver, she refused to meet my eyes or turn around. It was a look of someone who still tried to hold on to control, even in defeat. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. I love my daughter, I said plainly, but I cannot continue to enable her destructive choices. Love isn't about letting someone destroy you or themselves without consequence. She needs to face the full weight of what she has done. When the judge finally called on Emily to speak, she rose slowly, as if the very act of standing required all her strength. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, almost swallowed by the solemn courtroom. "I'm sorry for what I did to my father," she began. "I was desperate and I made terrible choices." Even her apology felt rehearsed, a script she must have gone over countless times in the weeks since her arrest. The desperation, the remorse, it didn't quite reach her eyes. Judge Thornton's voice was calm but firm as she pronounced the sentence, her words carrying the finality that echoed in every corner of the room. Emily Harper, you are hereby sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for identity theft, document forgery, and bank fraud. Additionally, you are ordered to provide full restitution to the victim in the amount of $700. The gavel came down with a resonant thud, a sound like a door closing on a chapter that could never be reopened. As they led Emily away in handcuffs, she finally turned to look at me, her eyes heavy with something between anger and sorrow. I hope you're happy now, she said quietly. I met her gaze steadily. I hope you learn responsibility. I replied, my voice steady but gentle. Outside the courthouse, Mike and I descended the steps slowly, the summer heat wrapping around us like a warm and cleansing wave. The air felt heavy, but somehow lighter than it had in months. Justice has been served, friend Mike said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of relief and finality. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of emotions I hadn't experienced in a long time. It wasn't happiness. There was nothing joyful about watching your child face the consequences of their crimes. But it was peace. After months of Lee's betrayal and heartbreak, peace finally settled over me. Thank you, Mike, I said sincerely, for doing what I couldn't. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. That's what friends are for. Together we walked toward his car, two old men who had learned the painful truth sometimes protecting someone means refusing to enable their worst impulses. Love, real love, requires boundaries and consequences. Margaret would have understood. She always knew that love without limits wasn't love at all. It was something far darker, something that could destroy you from the inside. In the end, it was just another form of harm, pain that cut deep but was necessary. Emily would serve her time, face the consequences of her actions, and hopefully learn the true meaning of accountability. As for me, I would take the slow, steady steps toward rebuilding my financial security piece by piece, with the heavy but clear knowledge that at last I'd chosen justice over misplaced loyalty. The scales finally had been balanced. If this story touched you or if you found it meaningful, please take a moment to like this video. Subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories and share your thoughts or feelings in the comments below. Your support means the world. To hear the next story, simply click the box on the left. Thank you for watching and for being part of this journey with me.